Good, how are you?
Larry, time to call your
Politics.
legislative meeting to order.
No, I got it one.
There, yeah.
Another minute and a half, yeah. I don't want to get accused of company bus.
Well,
Check the official clock. You got it.
it's 6.
You use the official time?
It's 6.
We'll call this meeting to order. Cheryl has just informed me that she's got the official time of 6 o'clock here, so somebody better jump up and set that hand in. Anyway, we'll call this
I'm too short.
Education and Government Committee to order. Anybody from the committee like to, any comments on the board? Okay, we'll move on. I set this meeting up, obviously, as you can see, for discussion on the local laws, the charter itself, and administrative codes and so on, so we can see what direction we want to go here. And as we all know, I guess most of us know, the local laws have to be, we have from 1951 until the present time, we have several volumes of local laws. Those local laws have to be gone through and checked, and anything that's in conflict with the charter is no longer a local law. The charter, once January 1st comes, the charter is that's the laws of the county. And anytime you want to change that charter, it has to be done through a local law. And the local laws become part of the charter. I have several charters. I have one from Chautauqua County. I have one from Herkimer County. I have the Herkimer County Charter, Administrative Code, 13 pages. That was since 1966 that was passed. I also have one here from Oneida County. I have one from Sullivan County, and they're all quite similar, the same. And anytime a local law is passed, that's added to that section of the charter where you change the charter, whatever section that is. Anyway, to review local laws, I talked to the Department of State. You got emails from the Department of State there, by the way. We'll get to a little bit later on. But to review the local laws, the suggestions are, number one is the county attorney's office normally reviews the local laws when you change to a charter. Number two is either the county executive or manager's office. That's the second one. Third one is the county legislature can review those local laws and take out the ones that don't belong in there. Or the county legislature can appoint someone or a committee to do that, whatever their choice is. So anyway, I went to talk, see Dan here a couple weeks ago. Dan said, well, let's get together. Kelly's here, and we'll get together and discuss the local laws and see what we can do to get those scanned and get them in order and indexed and so on, which they should be done. And I've got Kelly here tonight. If you have any questions, or she can explain she's more of this technical stuff than I am, so she can probably explain a little bit more what her and Dan have been doing. If you'll do that, please, for us.
Basically, after our meeting, we just I sent out an email to a couple of vendors that I have had recent contact with for scanning, and two of them gave us a quote, and we have them. I think, Cheryl, did you say you sent them around? Basically, the quotes are for scanning each of the binders. There are 8 binders. The quote also includes OCR, which is the optical character recognition, which basically means that you could type in a keyword and the scanning will pick up any of those words. So it doesn't have to be just something in the subject or title field. It can be any word that's within the local law, the text, or the body. There may be multi-page TIFF files, and it's up to you whether or not you want them accessible online for the public, or if it was just something that you wanted the county government to have the access to. So I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they will be posted on the internet, so anyone, like Kelly said, you want to have the public have access to them, which I wouldn't see any problem there. I mean, I think they're public record, obviously. So, anyway, we had 2 quotes there. The one quote was $450, one was $690, and Dan called me on the phone today too. He wasn't in today, but he called me this afternoon, and he said that even though the $690 quote was a little more money, he preferred that because he believes I think you agree, am I correct,
Yeah.
If that's a
and
better company?
The other thing too is that the $690 quote, that vendor was the only one that came on site to actually look at the documents. The other vendor just gave us a quote based on the information we provided. And we also had the sanitary district local law that we had not included in the original quote, or, in the initial email. But this vendor, Dan had talked to different county departments who have used this vendor, and they say they're pretty good, so.
I was kind of surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot more money than that.
So did I.
Yeah, I think everybody, Dan was, Kelly was, everybody was. And I guess I'll open up the, yes, Tom.
I don't know if maybe I'm going backwards to what we were talking about earlier, but I'm just trying to get this straight in my mind. When we talk about all those local laws, this company's going to scan these just and index them so that we can view them. Nobody's like discarding or pulling or doing it.
Correct.
They're just doing the scan, just so everybody's clear of that.
Right.
Am I right?
Yes.
Then at some point, a decision has to be made how it's determined that a local law is in conflict. And how is that determination going to be made? And is that done by this board, the new county legislature, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes,
Because-
well, I think I mentioned that when I started there. The county attorney's office normally is the one that's responsible for doing that. Or the county executive office, county executive board manager, whichever you have, they can be responsible for it.
But obviously that wouldn't happen until the executive took
That's
office.
correct. And
I was trying to figure out in the timeline here how this is going to work.
it doesn't have to be done right away. It's not an important timeline. It has to be done sometime though, within the next 6 to 10, 12 months.
Well, the only reason I
But you've
ask
got to
is
get it started. You've got to get it moving.
if you don't have it done, I'm just trying to play this out. December 31st, new board takes over January 1st, and it's just not completed for whatever reason, if you don't have it complete. You could actually have a legislature or an executive trying to put local law or resolutions together that'll conflict even more with something that may be being taken out, or I think it's almost, we should be doing our due diligence to try to have that as much as we can. I know there may be disagreement of a local law, or interpretations of what conflicts or doesn't, but I think we should try our best our due diligence to have that in place, because otherwise you're setting up these people for failure.
Yeah, I agree with it. I agree with that, what you're saying too. But it doesn't, there's nothing mandatory that says you have to have it done by a particular time, but it should be. You all set, Tom?
Yeah, because I think the transition needs to be as smooth as possible.
Yeah.
For the new legislative body of 9 and that executive.
Yeah, you don't want to leave them with a lot of loose ends.
Well, I mean, you should be trying to figure out at least, even if the county attorney and somebody in this board doesn't agree that there's a conflict with a resolution, at least point out what those conflicts are, so you can try to at least allow that next board coming in to know, hey, you may have a potential conflict, you guys figure it out.
And
At
the
least you know it's there.
second thing you arrive at by doing that is these local laws, that if like you're talking about a conflict in there and you can't resolve it, that may be where you have to amend that charter to fix that problem.
Yeah, that was a question I also had. When it comes to amending that charter, that is always done by local law?
Yes, I'm going to get to that when we get to the
Okay,
it says charter.
go ahead.
Okay, yeah. You're all set for now?
Yep.
Okay, Michael, you're.
Well, I was gonna say is for $700, let's get it moving, let's just do it.
Yeah, well, that's the question I would ask.
I would put it up, if somebody wants it, I'm on the committee, let's do it.
You want to
I
have
think it should be done immediately.
Yeah.
The more time you have, we're in April, let's do it.
Yeah.
that's the question. Does the committee agree then we want to do a resolution then?
I do.
Yes.
And start it on? We're talking about, and $700, I think Dan told me also, that included there's no freight involved, they're shipping, because
No.
they're going to pick them up?
Yep, he will pick
And
them
bring 'em
up
back.
in return. And
So
the
we don't
lead
have to-
time is probably, I think, a week to 2 weeks to
Okay.
have it done. And, keep in mind, if there's any question, the hard copies are the only copies that are here. So if for some reason they're ever lost, those laws are gone.
That was another thing in our conversation too with Kelly, said I think it was a good idea, even that some of these local laws will be taken out, But they'll be archived and they'll be available. They're there. It's not like they're going to disappear. Something like it.
Hearing that, are you telling me that there's only one copy? There isn't a copy in the attorney's office? You don't pass that on?
I don't believe so.
One set.
Yeah, you go up to the,
We're lucky we were on the second floor during the flood.
yeah, you go up to the supervisor's office and there they are in those binders and that's it.
It makes no sense to me, but again, the county doesn't make much sense to me. so-
You all set, Michael?
Yeah,
Okay,
except
Bill?
for now.
Just a quick question, Chairman. You might have already answered it. So what if this board found themselves passing a local law this year? It could actually find itself not being a part of the charter.
Well, I think before you pass a local law this year, you run it through the county attorney and make sure that he says it's not in conflict with the charter. I don't think you're gonna sit down and pass a law that's in conflict with, very few of those laws are gonna be in conflict with that charter. A lot of those local laws in there are stuff that, we pass local laws to sell a piece of property in the county or something like that. A lot of those local laws, but there's gonna be local laws in there, they're gonna be in conflict. So, I think the quicker we get at it, as Tom was saying, the quicker we get at it, I
Thank
think
you.
the better. Brian?
Who has the final say on whether or not a local law is in conflict?
County attorney,
Well,
I would say.
I think the county attorney gives his judgment on it.
Right. but
Yeah,
does-
well, yeah, not final call, that's just,
So does the board vote on, do you take a straw poll, or do you say, how does that work? If half the board says, it is, the other half says it isn't,
yeah.
Me personally, to answer that, I would say, we as a board, as a group, as a county attorney, do our thing, get rid of all the weeds that we know aren't a problem, and if you have something left over that you just don't know, you just make it aware to the new board coming in and let them figure it out. You're pointing it out and you're saying, here's the conflict, possibly. We don't wanna do it for you, just like we didn't wanna raise their pay, because we were gonna give them all a raise. We want them to do their job, remember? Just let them do it if they want to. I think that's what Michael said. And I think that should be the same thing. Let them handle the problem, because that's what the people put up with.
Yeah, because when I get to the reading on the, I have the county charter handbook here, and a lot of this stuff, it says this is, we'll be back to the local law in a second, but for the charter commission, this is from the, state gives you, this is the most updated version that you'll see on that emails that Catherine, can't remember her last name, Hamlin, but she mentions on her Hamlin. And anyway, this is the most recent edition of that, which I've had for a while. The Charter Commission will also want to be mindful there is no need for the charter to spell out in minute detail either the organization or operating procedures of each department. This can often be accomplished in an administrative code to be adopted later by the county legislative body on recommendation of the executive or manager. In many cases, it may be enough for the charter to establish a department or agency, specify a method for naming its head, and enumerate only in broad outline its duties and functions. A lot of the stuff they would do just goes on to the new legislature.
Right.
So, but I think, with the local laws, I think we have to weed out what's, and if there's some, there's gonna be black and white laws, black, no, white, yes, or whatever, but there's gonna be a few that probably might be in the gray area. So I think that'll be up to the county attorney to set them up. You all set, Dominic?
You all set, Brent?
yeah.
Oh, did you want?
No, I'm good.
Oh, you're all set, okay.
I think most of the local laws that might be in conflict are positions that have been created.
Yes.
So, those are the ones that they should know before the new legislature gets in, that a position no longer exists. So I think that's why it's important that these be reviewed quickly,
Yep.
so that, we can put things into motion. I think very few of the other local laws that I can remember are conflicting, but
I don't think there's a lot of them.
but the positions are the ones that are of question.
Right. But I agree with everybody's comments here. I think that, it should be done as soon as possible, number one. Number two, I think that the board, like I say, once they've been gone through and like you've sifted it out and got it down to the, to the minimum you're talking about there, then this board will have to decide which ones that we're gonna do something about, or, you know, we're gonna send down to the legislature. Some things you'll send down to the legislature because, you know, it's gonna be their thing. And then there's some that we're, you know, like you're saying, we're gonna have to deal with now. So that'd be my opinion.
Well, I'm thinking some of them were like, when your time period, when Grover Dodd and a lot of positions were created, purchasing agent, auditor, things of that nature. Those that were created by local law back then will no longer be in existence on 12/31, and the charter will call for the new positions, you know? So, that's what needs to be known.
Okay, so wish of the committee then to have a resolution to hire this firm. You've got the, pardon?
Who's sponsoring this?
I'll sponsor the resolution.
I'll second.
Barbara, second. Okay. We're all set on the local laws then. Okay. Do we need Kelly for, she'd probably like to get going if we don't need her anymore? Yes, John?
One more thing before she does leave.
Okay. Unless you want to hang around and watch
Well,
that.
she was approached by a paranormal group, and they would like to go into the old courthouse on a Saturday night.
No, not night, I have to be there.
And I told her that I would come to the board and see if you had any qualms with allowing them to come in.
It's the CNY Paranormal Group.
Is this a TV thing?
No, they're just investigators,
They,
but
are they local?
they're from Utica.
This is like ghost hunters?
Yes, I guess so.
Ghostbusters.
They
Bring
have a
my
Facebook
meters in,
page.
I've got all those meters.
They said that if there are any results, they'll put them on a CD, or, you know, you can make a presentation.
Okay.
We go.
So
Yeah.
is everybody good with
Yeah.
that? You okay with it?
She's okay with it. I'm okay. I mean,
I would
I don't-
I'll just come in on a Saturday and let them in for a few hours.
it's up to you, really. I can't imagine it being a liability issue, right? Because public, we have insurance and.
Well, they're only gonna be allowed in the hallway, they're not gonna be allowed in the election offices or in the upstairs, so.
I may let them go into my archives, only because there have been, you know, things up there.
Well, the ghosts are looking for the
It depends
relatives.
on, you know, hey, we always have
Ghosts
little
is
secret
all
once in a while, you know, the most you hear, so I don't know.
Sure.
All right.
It's our ghost, is it?
Go ahead.
So if everybody's okay with it, I'll give them the
Are we all set on the hearing on it?
Sure.
Well,
Just put it on the tourism site.
okay.
That's good.
Okay.
That might draw more people in, you
You
never know.
never know.
Yep. Any more questions for Kelly Portsmouth?
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you to Dan and Bo for all the work you've done and done a lot of research for us, and we had a couple free meetings, and, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, on the administrative codes, I think you all got the emails that I've been had back and forth between Department of State. As you can see, the administrative code, I think we all understand what an administrative code is, or do we? I think we all, and an administrative code is an extension of the charter. The charter tells, you know, why, and the administrative code is how. I guess they want to put it in very simple terms. But the, obviously, the administrative code is not mandatory, nor is it necessary if you don't want one. And in my conversations with the people at the Department of State, I don't think we need administrative code. There's administrative code. Fulton County doesn't have a charter, and there's their administrative code right there. You see that? A lot of papers. A lot of reading there, I can tell you that. A lot of stuff to go over. And like I said, I showed you the one from Herkimer County, that's 13 pages long. I talked to Jim Wallace, and I said to him one day, how long is your charter and code and all that sort of stuff? He says, I don't know, he says 10, 15 pages long, do you want one? I said, yeah, so I got one. Because Cheryl looked it up on the internet there one day, and anyway, I got one printed down here and everything. So, like I say, charters are more or less a extension of local laws. Every time you pass a local law, that becomes part of the charter. I've got charters, like I say, here from other counties, and anytime the charter's been, or the administrative code's been amended, that's just added to it, becomes part of that section. So with that explanation, I think Michael has,
No, if I can recall, I'm only recalling what I think I read in the charter that's been passed. I believe it states that there is an administrative code.
yes.
Now, is it our duty to give, I think it might be our duty to at least give them an outline to transition in.
That's what the people voted for.
Yeah,
The
that's
charter-
what I'm saying. They
the charter
voted for it.
says
It's in there.
administrative code.
It does. How long it is, of course, is determined in what you want to look like. The city has a book that's that thick, but it has, city type of operation.
Yeah, you have fire departments.
Yeah, we have
and
all of that.
Police departments and all that kind of stuff. You got all kinds of.
But you could give them a sort of an outline of what anybody who's elected is going to be on that board, to give them a transition to go into. I don't see why we shouldn't do that.
The art charter, the executive, the county executive portion of it, the legislative portion of it is that's very detailed and lengthy. But then you get to the department parts, and that's not as detailed as going back to the handbook that they give you for amending and adopting charters. I'll read here just a short. So there's short form charters and long form charters. I think we got kind of a mid-term. Well, like I say, I've seen the 10 pages and there's 150 pages, but ours is 30 pages roughly. So the short form charter makes it possible to present to the voters a relatively simple, more easily understood document in which only essential organizational matters are covered, along with the basic allocations of powers, duties, and authority. Said many existing county charters include exhaustive lists of powers granted to the various elements of government. In most cases, less numerous and less specific delegations of power expressed in fairly broad terms would prove both adequate and far more flexible. You should remember that the purpose of a charter is to facilitate the operation of the county as well as to specify limitations on its actions. So, like I say, you can take it from there. Any other comments? Yes, Tom?
Well, I'm just thinking that, while I know you said earlier you don't have to have one,
Yeah, it says in emails that they're not mandatory.
not mandatory, but because it's now been passed by the people of this county, we have to have one, am I right? We have to, because unless a local law says it doesn't no longer need it. Because the people in this county passed that. And what was created by that charter commission and passed on to the public, unlike the argument, and I'm not going to keep beating it up, the maps that never work.
Yeah.
But this was something specifically put in the charter, unless I'm wrong, and it said, it says we will, so it may not be up for me, I don't argue that point, but I believe it has to be, until either the legislative body, and ever how they do that, or the county executive, and ever how he or she does that, removes that out of there. Unless it says may have one. If it says may have one, then you're right.
Here's when I go back to the other sections I read though, and it says, the Charter Commission will also want to be mindful that there is no need for the charter to spell out in minute detail either the organization or operating procedures of each department. It says this can be accomplished in an administrative code to be adopted later by the county legislature on recommendation of the executive or manager.
Is that in the charter, or is that in an email you're reading?
I have a charter right here in front of me.
Yeah, I want to know what the charter says, because I think we spelled it out for us
Okay,
in
hang on.
the public when we voted on it. What I think you're reading, Larry, is opinions.
What section of?
What section?
Okay, here it is, your section 1503 of the Montgomery County Charter.
Right, this is what the people voted for and passed.
Yeah, it says the adoption of an administrative code. The administrative code shall be adopted by local law. I'm looking for but it doesn't say.
It does say shall or may.
It just says the administrative code shall be adopted by local law.
It has to be.
But it doesn't say who shall adopt it or who.
Well, the legislature and or the
See,
executive.
that's what it says in this, in the state handbook. It says the county legislature, on recommendation of the county executive or manager.
They have to do it. Somebody's got to do it in this new form of government coming up in 2014.
See, my question is, do we send this, do we do all this and send it down to this new legislature, new body? And they should adopt their own
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing, I'm not disagreeing with that, I'm just making a point, I think it has to be done
Yeah, I know what you're saying,
by
yeah.
somebody,
Yeah,
them.
yeah. I would have to get an opinion, I guess I'd have to email Dusty again, I got emails here from him too. Michael?
Having gone through some of the charter, which I did, and looking at it, and looking at the various changes, there's a lot of dates on the calendar which are different than what you normally operate here, and they're very significant. And I'm hearing comments that we're wondering where this is or where that is, what really probably should happen, because now it's getting to be pick up petitions, and people are gonna wanna run, they ought to know some of what's going on in the charter. I think you should have like a symposium, have somebody to come forward, 2 or 3 people, and explain the salient points of the charter. For instance, when the new budgets have to be in, change all the dates, what you do about local laws, how many days for the chief executive, et cetera, and how many department heads serve at the pleasure of the chief executive, and what may or may not occur. I think that's important, because it does have your form of government. When somebody takes over as a chief executive, they have broad-based powers, and I think that stuff ought to, you know, we're confused now. The public's, they voted, et cetera, but you tend to get involved in other things. Let's put it out, an outline of simplicity on what is really gonna happen, what could happen, so we have a transition which is a little smoother than have a section of confusion of saying, well, can a chief executive remove this particular department head, or keep this particular department head, or how many days, it was something they're saying within 10 days, et cetera, having to do with the entire transition of the government. So it remains smooth come January 1st of 2014. I don't think that's a lot to ask, but there seems to be a lot of questions going on even about stuff like this.
If they don't like it, they're gonna change it.
Well, they can, but they ought to at least have an idea. If you really read it and say, how many department heads, for instance, serve the pleasure immediately of the chief executive and could be told to go home or stay, or under what circumstances. There's also various aspects of the department heads which says that you have to have certain degrees, et cetera. So I think that's probably something that you would want to clarify, at least have some clarification of that.
Tom?
I agree with Michael 100% that something ought to be done. Here's the problem. We just faced it. I have a very strong opinion of what that charter says that these people in this county passed, and it says they shall have an administrative.
I agree.
code. Larry thinks maybe there's a little wiggle room there. Nothing against Larry or me, I'm using it as an example. Whoever is this symposium of people cannot be somebody that's going to go in with an opinion, because their opinion may not be the same as
Well,
mine.
sometimes you have, if I can interrupt for a second, I know when we did it, the Department of State came in,
That would be a good choice.
and they said, here's what it is.
Because you need, you know, it's going to be based on somebody's opinion that can always end up in court. But,
So a lot of things.
yeah, but again, you would have a, I think you might be having a difficult time doing what you're saying unless it was somebody like you said who has that authoritative knowledge that it can't be me, because I'm going to have my opinions on everything.
Well, I would assume, if I could, that it would be the Department of State. Somebody and ask them to come
Right.
in, and if you have 10 questions, 15 questions, at least it would, out to the public, they'd
Yeah.
say, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that this
Right.
department head, within 10 days could be gone or stay, or however, how long does, you know, how long is it serves the pleasure. Remember, when you serve the pleasure of somebody, you're at the pleasure,
It's a pleasure.
et cetera. Well, you're next. We're up, done.
Just writing down a couple of notes here.
And again, all the dates have changed. I think you ought to go look in that, see how the dates have changed.
I think a timeline like you're
Yeah,
talking about
timeline
is great.
is, you've got to
Something
really
that's
see it.
definitive,
It's a
that
little
there's
different.
that's all black and white. Here's when the budget is, here's when, that's a good thing.
You should read that.
Okay. Other comments? Dominic?
Yeah. Since I'm going by that same adopting amended county charters, and it says on page 12, under long form or short form charter, it's sometimes said that a charter specifies what is to be done and who has the authority to do it. And the administrative code spells out how it is to be done. I've got several charters and administrative codes like you do. Oneida County being one of them.
Yeah, I got that right here.
All right. In the Oneida County Administrative Code, Oneida County adopted their charter for January 1st, 1963. They adopted the administrative code on December 12th, 1962, or 15th, whatever it was, to be effective on 1/1, so that when the new legislature came in, they had the rules to go by. Also, in this manual,